Suzume or Suzume. So Suzume is from director Makoto Shinkai, who is a acclaimed animation director hailing from Japan. You may know him from his very popular film Your Name, which came out just a few years ago, snubbed at the Oscars, in my humble opinion. He also most recently did Weathering with You, and before all of that, he did a film called 5 centimeters per second, which got a lot of attention, at least in Japanese animation circles. Anime, as it's commonly known, is usually hand animated, but I think Shinkai's studio works well because they blend hand-drawn animation with just enough CGI to look hand-drawn, to kind of get across like the gap of a full feature while also being on budget. Unfortunately, Shinkai's writing is what makes these movies so effective. He often tells stories of young people who are struggling to overcome something much larger than themselves, right? Whether that be an anxiety from inside or an external force that they have to physically fight, usually both. And Suzume isn't much different. I think it's worth mentioning before we jump into it. I don't want to tell you to tune out, but Andy and I knew absolutely nothing about this movie going in. I hadn't even watched a trailer. And in a lot of ways, I think that may be the best way to see it. So a micro review here is most appropriate. Suzume is the story of Suzume. That's her name, right? A young high school girl who lives on the far south side of Japan, goes to a small school, lives with her aunt, and ultimately things are pretty normal until one day she meets a stranger on the side of the road on the way to school who asks her if she knows any ruins in the area. Weird question, but okay. She says, yeah, there's an old village that got bombed out a few years ago. You can go check that out. She gets to school and thinks to herself, you know what? Actually, I want to know what that guy was about. She had a weird feeling when she saw him. So she hops on her bike, rides back, and there she discovers a door, right? Just right in the middle of this kind of like school stadium thing. And when she opens it, she discovers that not all is as it seems in the world. In a bit of a Alice through the looking glass situation, things are very different on the other side of this otherworldly portal. And this stranger has an awful lot to do with that. And before she knows it, Suzume is thrust on an adventure not only to undo this problem that she inadvertently caused, but to save all of Japan. It's a surprisingly long romp. It's about 2 hours. The film covers before I get into it, Andy, what did you think of Suzume?
Initially, I wasn't really into it because it has a very kind of stereotypical anime setup. You have a young girl. She's interested in this guy. There's this fantastic setting. It's like how every anime starts. But it really goes to some interesting places. It's surprisingly heavy because it's about grief and loss and kind of working through those things very heavily, but it's also about Japan's fear of nuclear annihilation, which is a constant theme in Japanese work. Famously, Akira is exactly that, and you get some of that because they have these portals that they open, and the reason they have to close them is because there will be these massive earthquakes. But it's kind of representative of like the dropping of the atomic bomb, and I was like, this is a kids movie. Like this is like for teenagers. And it's got some really heavy stuff, but it handles it in a really mature way, and there's great visuals, and it's also funny. There's a lot of good humor. It's also very modern. Like there's lots of like cell phones and social media kind of stuff aspects to the movie as well. I was really, really surprised, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think one of the things Shinkai does really well is his settings. And the previous two features that I've seen, Your Name and Weathering with You, went and saw both in theaters. Both of them are, number one, God, I got to get this out of the way, beautifully animated. Good God. Like, this is some of the most beautiful animation you could see on a screen. It is criminal. These films are not nominated for Best Animated every year. I've heard some people say, well, it's a foreign language film, and there are some issues with where that comes from and who gets into it. Okay, sure, fine. But it's worth mentioning, before this movie, not only did it have a full trailer package, 22 minutes long, Disney and DreamWorks both advertised on it. All right. These studios know that this film's got heat. All right. Makoto Shinkai is turning out good work. I hope he gets a bit more respect on the name. The animation's movie's stellar. And both of those movies, Your Name and Weathering with You, started with fundamentally small settings. Both have a bit of a small town and a bit of a city feel. I think both are in Tokyo or nearby. I'm not even really sure, but this movie uniquely travels nearly the breadth of Japan. Suzume's journey literally takes her from one side to the other of the island. She will be on planes. She isn't actually going to have plane. Trains and automobiles for sure, though, and boats, buses, a bicycle, a couple of bicycles, actually, a motorbike. She takes a journey like from one place to another, from her small town to a bigger town to a big city to the farmlands, like out to the middle of nowhere, and then turns around and goes all the way back, which is crazy. But it makes it feel like this big, grand, epic thing, right? And I think one of the things I really like about Shinkai's work is I never know where exactly it's going. I can never put the pieces together before he gets there. And in a way, you don't want to. Like, I think one of the most charming things about a great feature is that you can sit back and kind of turn your brain off and just let it come to you, right? Let me figure out where these themes are going as they happen. Let me try to figure out like what's coming next. Admittedly, I will say I did find myself a bit more confused by this one, like Andy said, at least in the open, because it all feels very plain. And I think that's part of the point, right? Yeah. Suzume is supposed to be portrayed as a bit of a plain girl, but before you know it, like it ends up going somewhere that I didn't predict. And I think that's what he does so well. A stellar presentation wrapped in like mystery. And I agree, like the subtext of this movie is fantastic. Like I'm a big Akira fan, and yeah, Andy's mention of like, functionally like the fear of annihilation is really fascinating because it's wrapped in this story of like a young girl who's using her iPhone to cross Japan.
Yeah, like I said, it has very tropey, stereotypical setup, but it does that thing that any great movie does, which is it tells you a story, but it's about much deeper things than what the surface story. Because like again, it's this fantastical story. You got to close these doors, or else this big destructive monster will get out, and it's a fantasy film, but it's about very real concrete things.
Yeah, I really like the blend of like old feel, I should say, with modern technology. And he mentioned it in his opening bit, but there are phones everywhere in this movie, even in places where it feels like there shouldn't be, right? Like small town Japan, where they're like farmlands, nothing's happening. Like Suzume will get her phone out to like check a text or something, and her aunt is texting her the whole movie. She's functionally gone missing and completely blown it off. And the aunt thinks she's with a guy, and she's like, "You better not be with a boy." Oh my god. But I liked how modern like that makes the trappings of this feel. It feels like kind of a timeless story, like wrapped in a setting that's accessible. There's a scene when she's staying with a friend at just outside of her hometown, and they're sleeping on these like roll out pads on the ground, futons, and they have their phones like dangling across like cables from the wall, like to get to the floor, like just like any kid would like plug in their phone for an alarm clock before they go to sleep. The brands in this movie are all on, right? McDonald's, Spotify, Kubota, Toyota, like Acura. Like you just see like actual brands, like real brands in the movie, like it's nothing. Like, and in Renfield, you see an Old Navy bag, and you're like, you roll your eyes like, okay, yeah, it's an Old Navy placement. In this movie, like it's just part of the world. Like it doesn't feel like these are ad placements. These just feel like, a reflection of the world we live in. I think that stuff like helps people step through the screen, helps them feel like, oh, this is a modern tale in a modern setting that I understand and know, and that these are like more accessible characters. And that helps like the emotion hit deeper, because just like any of his features, like this movie does ultimately have an emotional message that personally rang just a hair hollow, but there were definitely some people getting a little teary-eyed in our theater. So it may just be me.
Yeah, I definitely got caught up in the emotion for sure, and they're just some of the just portrayals of loss and grief were just very accurate, I think. But like I said, just surprised at the maturity of the film, and again, just because something is for younger audiences doesn't mean it has to be trash or for babies.
Right. Like something Pixar was praised as doing in their early work was making films, and they still do this on occasion, but making movies that look like they're for kids, but really are for the adults. Like deep down, you didn't know it, but like Inside Out is not made for 13-year-olds. Like it's made for the parent who's sitting there going, oh my God. Up is not made for like 8-year-olds. Like that's made for people who are a little older, you know, like, and you wouldn't know it looking at it, but like it's only when you start to look deeper that you see, oh, okay, like there's something really resounding here. And I think Suzume does that pretty well. Like I liked it more than Weathering with You. I don't think I liked it more than Your Name is so good. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I can't believe that movie didn't genuinely get best animated that year. Like criminal. Oh my God. Um, this movie's doing great at the box office too. Like a lot of people are seeing it. Like it's getting a lot of attention for what it is. Like I know it's not getting like Jimungo release or anything, but it's popular and the circles it needs to be in. I don't think it's in a bad place.
Yeah, it's this was a big hit in Japan in the fall, and also it's been released in China and it's been successful there. So, and it's glad it's getting around to us as well.
Yeah, me too. We'll definitely have to check out Shinkai's next work, whatever that is. For now,
Yeah.
we should wrap up our little micro review. I meant for it to be a micro review, and here I am going on full review. It's fine. Andy, would you recommend Suzume?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a fantastic coming of age story. That there's fantasy elements. It has a very kind of familiar setup, but then it goes into a lot of really unexpected places, both narratively and visually as well. Really exciting kind of climaxes that we reach. A lot of fun.
Yeah, same. I think Suzume is a ton of fun. I'm really glad we watched it. Like I said, I'll probably go see whatever his next feature is without question. I don't know, man. I think Suzume is a good time. Go check it out if you're interested. If you're into foreign animation, if you're an anime fan, like I think Suzume is a good time. We don't watch a lot of anime on this show, so it's cool. Like when we get the opportunity to see something that feels theatrical, wraps itself up, right? Like it's not a 130 episode series. You're not watching One Piece. Like you just got a tight 2-hour, boom, start to finish story. Easy to grab, right? Finger food for movies, but like really good finger food. Anyway, with that, we should wrap the show. Andy, what are we watching next week?